And and when my mom burst in, there was like I had no clothes on, there was nothing around me, I was just naked. I wasn't masturbating or anything. I keep saying that, but it's true. What's up, my brethren? I'm Jarvis Black, and today I'm back at you with another video. I want to talk about jokes. Jokes are my favorite thing in the whole world. I've been performing stand-up comedy since 2010, and I wouldn't say that I'm great at it or even very good at it, but I love it.
My grandparents' relationship is a mess now. I think my grandpa's coming down with dementia. He calls me every other day, telling me that I owe him $300. And at this point, it's ridiculous, you know? It's like, come on, Grandpa. Why do you still remember that?
And I have been obsessed with stand-up comedy, obsessed with jokes ever since. I just think that they're like one of the coolest things. They're just magical. The fact that somebody can come up with something in their head with just words, talk to a group of people, and trigger laughter. I just think that is one of the coolest, most fascinating things. I think it's one of the most fascinating art forms, frankly. One of the things I wanted to talk about and really get into and make a video about was joke writing. Writing jokes and how jokes evolve over time in a stand-up comics act. Crafting a really good joke or bit can take a long time. Sometimes it can take years to get it just right. Performing it over and over again in front of different audiences, getting feedback, other comics giving you tags, writing new tags yourself. Sometimes you gotta write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and perform and rewrite and rewrite. And you're back at it the next night. Sometimes the idea for a joke just randomly pops into your head. You might see something, hear something, and you're like, oh, I wanna write a joke about that. Or sometimes like a premise, or even sometimes like a punchline. In the case of the joke that I want to talk about today, will just pop in your head. Other times you might go through an experience, or you might have a story to tell from your past or anything like that. Sometimes people just like to tell stories from their lives and write jokes into them, punch them up with jokes. When comics say this is a true story, it's very rarely, when you hear a comic telling a joke and they say it's a true story, it's very rarely a true story. At the very minimum, it's been written and punched up with jokes, but more than likely, most of it's fabricated. A lot of people don't realize just how much actual time is spent on preparation and writing jokes. Some comics like to write everything out just in detail, just thoroughly write every bit out, every setup and punchline, and rewrite it down on paper. Other comics they just think of a premise, they might put it in their phone, they might think of something that they think is funny, and then they get up and work it out on stage, and they get up and open mics and work it out and work the joke out that way, rather than actually just writing it all down word for word. But either way, there's still a lot of writing and crafting involved, and I think a lot of people just aren't really aware of that. A lot of people seem to think that comics just come up with jokes off the top of their head, and while there is some crowd work, and there's even actually some writing and preparation that kind of goes into crowd work too, because you can kind of build a Rolodex of how to respond to certain types of scenarios. And when you're purposely doing crowd work as opposed to like doing hecklers, you ask specific questions that solicit certain types of responses, and then you can respond in certain ways. But a lot of times it's, you know, the crowd work type stuff can be off the top of the head, but most of the time these jokes are tried and true and practiced and rehearsed and prepared and written and rewritten. And that's why comedians get really upset when they hear about another comedian stealing jokes, or just joke theft in general. So what I thought would be fun to do is talk about a joke and how it evolved over the course of 7 years. It started as a joke that I did at my very first open mic. I still tell it to this day. Now, I tell it pretty differently. I think it'll be fun to kind of look at how it evolved from the very beginning to basically what it is now. So the joke started as a tweet. I was really interested in getting involved in stand-up comedy in 2010. I was trying to come up with material. Joke writing is not easy. Joke writing is really hard. And so what I thought was, I'll just try to write a bunch of one-liners and I'll post them on Twitter and see how they land and see what kind of responses I get, and then I can try to write some jokes based on that. I really wanted to do stand-up comedy, but I didn't want to get on stage without something that I felt confident with, and that was always like my biggest thing, is like in order for me to get up there the first time, it's such a nerve-wracking experience, I needed to have material that I believed in. Whether I still believe in that material or not is another question, because when you go back and watch your old stuff, and even making this video and going through the old videos that I recorded, it's painful. It's quite painful, but it's still fun.
He's the one who wanted it. I grew up in Seattle, and when I was a kid, my mom used to rush into my room and say, "That rain, that's God's tears over your masturbation." I said, "Well, he's going to cry like a baby tonight."
So this joke started as a tweet, and the tweet was, "Rain is God's tears over your masturbation." And just one rainy afternoon, I thought, I live in the Seattle area and it rains here. So that was just kind of a weird thought that popped in my head. I posted it on Twitter and it got some likes and responses, and I was like, oh, this is maybe I can turn this into a joke. So in thinking about how to try to turn this into a joke, I remembered a time when I was like in early teens, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 maybe, and my mom, I had just gotten out of the shower and I was in my room. My mom just opened the door and I hadn't gotten dressed yet, and I was sitting on the ground. I was sitting there naked. I don't remember why. I wasn't masturbating. Then I thought of like, oh, I can take that story and this idea of rain is God's tears over your masturbation, and I think the idea of your parents catching you masturbating is inherently funny. I think a lot of people can relate to it. Even if their parents haven't caught them masturbating, you can still kind of relate to the fear of being caught, because nobody wants them being caught masturbating. So that's how I came up with the initial joke, and that's what I told at the very first open mic that you saw. The funny thing is that what was actually my initial punchline sort of ended up being a tag on the joke. When I got together with one of my best friends and talking about like doing stand-up, and I had been doing it a couple of months, and people seemed to really like this one joke. I was cycling a lot of new jokes in and out, just trying to figure out what worked and what didn't, and a lot of them were really, really bad. Maybe I'll cut in a clip of a really bad one here.
My girlfriend gets really jealous of pornography, which is stupid. I keep telling her, look, honey, if you want to be jealous of something, be jealous of my hand. Because that's what I use when I think about your sister. Awes are just as good as laughter.
It's painful, but I will probably do it anyway. So I was cycling jokes in and out, but the one joke that always really, really got a good response was the rain is God's tears over your masturbation. And the punchline was always, he's gonna cry like a baby tonight. My friend came up with I think the much better punchline that turned my punchline into a tag. That is, I hope you brought your umbrella.
When I was a kid, my mom used to burst into my room and tell me,
"That rain outside, those are God's tears over your masturbation."
and I said, "Well, hope you have your umbrella. He's gonna cry like a baby tonight."
So then I started telling it with, I hope you brought your umbrella punchline, and the joke just like really took off from there. And a lot of times would close with it or I'd open with it because it was one of my strongest jokes at that point. And it was just that exactly what I had told in my very first open mic. Didn't really have to change a lot about it. I think the way that I kind of sort of phrasing it was a little bit differently. You know, I tried at different tempos, different speeds, delivering it faster, delivering it slower, waiting longer before I deliver the punchline, waiting longer before I deliver the tag, those kinds of things, just to figure out exactly where was that sweet spot, where was that great timing and what made that joke work. I wrote some other jokes to sort of tie it into that, and then I had kind of my bit that worked really well that I would close with, and I'd always be able to close strong. Especially like when you start getting paid for stand-up comedy, you want to make sure that you've got material that really works, otherwise you're not earning your money. So that kind of ended up sort of being a really big go-to bit for me to close with, especially early on.
One last thing and I'm out of here. Your mom ever catch you guys masturbating? Yep. I'm proud of that. When I was a kid, my mom burst into my room unannounced, and I was lying naked on the floor, like everyone masturbates, right? And the closest thing near me was a Davy Crockett raccoon skin cap. So I grabbed that and I covered myself up. And she goes, "Wow, son, you really have matured." I mean, I was like, yeah, Mom, thanks for making it awkward. And she goes, "Son, you know that rain outside? Those are God's tears over your masturbation." Really? Well, I hope you brought your umbrella. He's gonna cry like a baby tonight. That's it for me. You guys have a great night.
So what I realized though in that process was that it was just, I wanted more substance to the joke. I wanted more substance to the bit so that it just carried more weight. And I found that when I added more to it, it did carry more weight and would get even bigger laughs because of the setup. Going back to the original story, I pulled that experience of my mom, bursting into my room, because that story in of itself was pretty funny and might have been able to figure out a way to make it a joke on its own without the rain is God's tears. Because my mom never actually said that, let's be clear. My mom wasn't a super religious person or didn't have anything against masturbation or anything like that. That was never something that she ever said. But combining it with this story of her actually bursting into my room, even though I wasn't masturbating, kind of made for a funny combination. And the best part of that was that I could add a couple of little jokes in between while setting up the bigger joke at the end. There was a funny part that actually happened in real life that I didn't even include in the joke because I didn't know how, because it wasn't really, it's just a funny sort of anecdote. Because when my mom burst into my room, I had a Davy Crockett raccoon skin cap in my room for whatever reason. I got it as a gift from somewhere, I don't remember. And it was just sitting there. And when my mom burst in, there was I had no clothes on, there was nothing around me, I was just naked. I wasn't masturbating or anything. I keep saying that, but it's true. So I grabbed the Davy Crockett cap. And if you're not familiar with the Davy Crockett cap, it's got a raccoon tail on it. It's a big, round, hairy cap with a raccoon tail. I grabbed that raccoon skin cap and put it over my crotch, which was just one of the most unfortunate real life stories. And I put it over my crotch so that my mom couldn't see my twig and berries. And the tail flopped over the front of the cap, and it was pretty funny. And my mom goes, "Whoa, you've matured," as a joke, because she's a sarcastic, funny person. And I was like, why am I not telling that part of the story or including that in the joke? And then that's how we get to the final joke. I don't want to say final because there's still the possibility that I could add or expand or change things about the joke, but that's how I got to where I am today with the bit. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I hope you had a great time today. I hope you like jokes as much as I do. And if you like what I'm doing here, like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, and we'll talk again soon.